And this is what nobody will tell you. You are living in a cross-section of reality. The fourth dimension, where past, present, and future coexist, is accessible right now through a specific technique that Godard documented. But there is a reason why this information is not in university curricula. You see, when you understand that, you can literally select which future to experience. Not attract, not manifest, but select from options that already exist, you become ungovernable. Why do you think that billions operate in automatic mode, reacting to circumstances and creating chaotic realities without realizing it? The mechanism is brutally simple. Between waking and sleeping, your consciousness can navigate dimensionally. You enter the scene of your chosen future, participate in it, and feel it as an accomplished reality. The mirror universe has no choice but to reorganize everything to correspond. While the masses continue to be trapped in three-dimensional cause and effect, there exists a group using this knowledge right now to operate on another level of reality. The difference? They have discovered that they are the projector, not the screen.
Humanity lives trapped in a dimensional prison that it has built for itself, and the key to escape has always been within the mind of each individual. But it has remained restricted to small circles of practitioners. This is a precise technology for the manipulation of reality that the ancient masters knew, and that modern science is beginning to rediscover through quantum physics. The secret lies in the understanding that time, as humanity experiences it, is a three-dimensional illusion. There exists a fourth dimension where past, present, and future coexist simultaneously, and through specific techniques of consciousness, anyone can access it to select which version of the future they wish to manifest. Neville Goddard, one of the few initiates who dared to publicly reveal this knowledge in the 20th century, documented in detail the functioning of this mechanism. His teachings, compiled in works such as Out of This World, are practical instructions based on direct experimentation with the multidimensional nature of consciousness. Traditional educational and religious institutions have systematically suppressed or ridiculed this knowledge for a simple reason. If the masses were to discover that they possess the literal power to rewrite their destiny through controlled imagination, the entire structure of social control would collapse. After all, how can you maintain populations in a state of dependence and submission when they discover that they are, in fact, conscious operators of their own reality? The fundamental truth that needs to be understood is this: there is no separate God dictating human destiny. What organized religions call God, the quantum field, the all, the universal consciousness, all of these terms point to the same reality, is an impersonal and perfectly responsive system that reflects back exactly what each individual consciousness projects. It is a cosmic mirror without its own will, without judgment, without favorites. This system was designed with an essential characteristic: voluntary forgetfulness. Each consciousness that enters this three-dimensional experience temporarily accepts to forget its true divine nature. It is like entering a virtual reality game so immersive that the player momentarily forgets that they are playing. This veil of amnesia is not a punishment or flaw. It is what makes the experience genuine and free while meaningful. But here is the paradox that few understand. Although we have consciously forgotten our creative nature, the mechanism of creation continues to operate incessantly. At every moment, through unconscious assumptions, habitual fears, and conditioned mental patterns, each person is literally creating their future reality. Human suffering does not come from a punitive God or from malevolent external forces. It comes from the unconscious and chaotic use of this creative power. This video is a detailed exposition of the real mechanics of how consciousness interacts with the dimensional fabric of reality to produce concrete experiences in the physical world. These are tested and proven techniques that allow anyone to take conscious control of this process and begin to deliberately select which of the infinite possible futures they wish to experience. Regardless of belief, this knowledge operates independently of whether you believe in it. The question is, Are you ready to assume the radical responsibility of discovering that you have always been the sole creator of your reality? Because once this knowledge is truly understood and applied, there are no more victims of fate, only unconscious or conscious creators. To understand how to mentally manipulate the future, it is necessary to first understand the dimensional structure of reality, a knowledge that remains hidden because it completely challenges the common perception of what is possible. The first dimension manifests itself as a singular point, a state of existence that maintains no relationship with anything beyond itself. It is consciousness in its most primordial state, pure but limited. When a relationship is established between 2 points, the second dimension emerges, the world of lines, of length and width. It is like living perpetually on a sheet of paper, without any concept of what exists above or below. The third dimension, where humanity believes it resides exclusively, adds depth and height. Here we experience the world through the 5 senses, moving through 3-dimensional space, but remaining enslaved to a linear understanding of time. And it is exactly in this temporal prison that the great deception resides. The 4th dimension is not science fiction or mathematical abstraction. It is an accessible reality where time ceases to be a straight line and reveals itself as it truly is. A field where all moments, past, present, and future, exist simultaneously. Just as the 2nd dimension is merely the shadow projected by the 3rd, our 3-dimensional reality constitutes only a slice, a cross-section of the 4th dimension. Neville Goddard discovered through direct experimentation that we possess a mental faculty capable of transcending sensory limitations and consciously accessing this higher dimension. This faculty is the creative imagination directed by the will, not empty fantasy or daydreaming, but the ability to think and feel in 4-dimensional terms. Every human being carries 2 radically distinct perspectives of existence, although the majority remains unconscious of this duality. The first is the natural focus, that mind governed exclusively by the physical senses, what the ancient texts called the carnal mind. This perspective accepts only what it can see, touch, and measure. It is the mind of the natural man who looks at present circumstances and declares, "This is the unchangeable reality." The second perspective is the spiritual focus, controlled by conscious imagination and directed by desire. The ancient masters called it the mind of Christ, not for religious connotation, but because it represents the state of consciousness that recognizes its creative power. This mind sees through appearances, penetrates the veil of the sensory world, and perceives the infinite possibilities awaiting manifestation. The ingrained habit of trusting only the physical senses creates a voluntary blindness. It is like living in a dark cave, holding a flashlight that only illuminates the stone walls, completely ignoring the entrance bathed in sunlight. To develop spiritual vision, the ability to perceive beyond the 3-dimensional world, it is necessary to deliberately disentangle the mind from sensory evidence. This process requires specific mental discipline. One must focus attention on invisible states, feeling them internally with such intensity that they acquire all the sharpness and texture of physical reality. Concentrated and sustained thought in a particular direction possesses the power to exclude all other sensory impressions, making them temporarily disappear from consciousness. External reality literally functions as a magical mirror. It possesses no will of its own, agenda, or purpose beyond faithfully reflecting what each consciousness projects onto its surface. Like a mirror that can only reflect what is before it, reality responds to what we project. The same principle governs all of creation. This system of perfect reflection is not accidental. It was designed this way because the all, the universal consciousness, desires to experience itself through infinite unique perspectives. Your freedom of choice is sacred and inviolable, precisely because without it, there would be no authentic adventure, only a predetermined script without meaning or purpose. When someone persists in a new image of themselves, keeping it alive in the imagination with unshakable conviction, the universe mirror has no choice but to reorganize itself to reflect this new reality. In the three-dimensional world, this reorganization appears as a sequence of synchronistic events, meaningful coincidences, and inexplicable changes in circumstances. But in truth, it is simply the adjustment of the mirror to correspond to the newly projected image. The understanding of these fundamental principles opens the door to true mental alchemy, the conscious transmutation of the lead of present circumstances into the gold of the desired future. Desire is not a human weakness to be overcome through spiritual discipline, contrary to what certain doctrines teach. It is the fundamental mechanism through which consciousness moves and creates, the mainspring of all action in the universe. Without desire, we would not move even a finger. This is a law as absolute as gravity, but infinitely more powerful in its implications. Observe carefully. The only desires that truly impel us to action are those that capture and maintain our attention. Thousands of vague desires float through consciousness daily, but only those that magnetize our sustained attention gain the power to reshape reality. But there is something that moralists prefer to ignore. Every desire, without exception, carries some personal gain in view. There is no absolutely altruistic desire. Where there is nothing to gain, no desire arises, and consequently, no action. This apparently selfish nature of desire is not a flaw in the cosmic design. It is precisely what allows the system of individual creation to function. The all fragmented itself into infinite individual perspectives exactly to experience the pleasure of desiring, seeking, and achieving through each unique point of consciousness. Trying to eliminate personal desire would be like trying to make the heart stop pumping blood. It is going against the very nature of existence. The key to progress and to the realization of the boldest dreams lies in a radical practice, immediate obedience to the voice of desire. Not the superficial and capricious desire, but that deep desire that arises from the center of being and refuses to be silenced. When such a desire arises, the appropriate response is not to question its legitimacy or morality, but to understand that its emergence already indicates the existence of a path to its realization. To truly desire a specific state is equivalent to already possessing it in the fourth dimension. This is not a metaphorical statement, but a literal description of how the mechanics of creation work. Desire is the evidence that what is being sought already exists as a real possibility, awaiting conscious selection. The only question is, will you assume the feeling of already possessing what you desire? Here is where the most revolutionary and misunderstood principle of all mental science comes in. Assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled and living based on that conviction literally alters the future in harmony with your assumption. This is not about pretending or deceiving yourself. It is recognizing that at the four-dimensional level, where all possible futures coexist, you are selecting which timeline to experience through the state of consciousness you maintain in the present. The mechanics are precise. When you firmly sustain the sensation of being what you desire to be, of already possessing what you desire to possess, you are tuning your consciousness to the specific frequency of that reality. The mirror universe, which has no agenda of its own beyond reflecting, must reorganize all the necessary elements to externally manifest what you are maintaining internally. But why does this knowledge remain hidden from the majority? Why do billions live and die without ever discovering that they possess this power? The answer lies in the veil of forgetfulness that each consciousness accepts upon entering this dimension. You and the infinite are literally one, not poetically, not philosophically, but factually. However, to make this earthly adventure genuine, you voluntarily forgot your true nature. It is like entering a virtual reality game so sophisticated that you temporarily believe you are the character, completely forgetting that you are the player. If you maintained full consciousness of being the omnipotent creator of each experience, where would the challenge be? Where would the surprise, the growth, and the journey be? Forgetfulness is what allows for authentic adventure. This veil of amnesia explains the central paradox of human existence. When people question, how does a loving God allow so much suffering? They start from a false premise. There is no separate God allowing or denying experiences. We ourselves, each individual consciousness, are creating our experiences through the unconscious use of the law of being. The cosmic mirror does not judge whether you are acting wisely or madly, it simply reflects. Acting in a chaotic, fearful, or destructive manner before this mirror results in seeing reflections of chaos, fear, and destruction. Not because the universe is cruel or punitive, but because it is impartially faithful. It is a perfect system in its simplicity. You receive exactly what you're being, no more, no less. The human tragedy is not in the system itself, but in the ignorance of how it works. Billions operate this powerful creative mechanism completely blind, creating by default instead of by design, reaping results that seem arbitrary, but are, in truth, mathematical reflections of their internal states of consciousness. Years of systematic experimentation with the states of consciousness have revealed a specific formula for accessing the fourth dimension and consciously selecting the desired future. This is not one among many possible techniques. It is the fundamental method discovered by all who have managed to genuinely master the art of mental creation. The first step requires surgical clarity to define exactly what you desire. Vague aspirations for happiness or success are useless in this work. The four-dimensional mechanism responds only to precise instructions, just as a quantum computer does not process ambiguous commands. You must know, with absolute specificity, which state you wish to occupy. The second step is more subtle and requires deep understanding. To mentally construct an event that you would naturally encounter after the realization of your desire. Not during, but after. This event must unequivocally imply that your goal has been achieved, with you as an active participant in the scene, not a mere observer. If you desire a specific promotion, do not imagine receiving the news. Imagine a casual conversation weeks later, where the promotion is mentioned as an established fact. The third step violates all the conventions of modern productivity, the complete immobilization of the physical body, and the deliberate induction of a borderline state between waking and sleeping. Lie down or relax deeply in a chair. Close your eyes. Allow the physical body to become irrelevant. This is not the moment for physical action. It is the moment for dimensional action. In this state of bodily immobility and maximum mental mobility, with attention completely focused on the intended action, you must feel yourself performing it here and now. Not tomorrow, not when conditions allow, now. The fourth dimension does not recognize linear time. For it, your vivid imagination and your physical experience possess the same ontological weight. The critical distinction that separates successful practitioners from eternal failures lies at this point. You must actively participate in the imaginary action, not observe it as a spectator. Many visualize their desires as if watching a movie of themselves. This is completely useless. You must be inside the scene, experiencing it through your own imaginary eyes, feeling the textures, hearing the sounds, experiencing the emotions as if you were physically present. Experience teaches a counterintuitive lesson. It is more effective to restrict the imaginary action to a single condensed act. repeating it obsessively until it acquires complete sensory density. Trying to imagine a complex narrative disperses the mental energy. A single gesture, shaking the hand of congratulations, touching a wedding ring on the finger, signing a specific document, when repeated with sufficient intensity, possesses more power of materialization than hours of elaborate daydreaming. There is a particularly powerful technique for those who struggle with detailed visualization. In a relaxed and drowsy state, mentally repeat a single short phrase that implies the realization of the desire. Thank you is especially effective, as it carries the presupposition that something has been received. It is done works for more assertive minds. The phrase becomes a dimensional mantra, a vibratory key that aligns your consciousness with the desired reality. The timing is crucial. If the goal is a deep conscious projection into the four-dimensional world, you must maintain the practice until natural sleep arrives. Do not force sleep, let it arise organically while you maintain the feeling of the fulfilled desire. It is at the moment of transition between waking and sleeping that the veil between dimensions becomes thinnest. But here is what no modern guru will reveal. This practice requires what contemporary society most despises: sustained mental discipline without immediate guarantees. In an era of instant gratification, you are asked to plant dimensional seeds and trust in laws that your senses cannot verify. You must experience in the imagination, with all the sharpness of reality, what would be experienced in the flesh upon reaching your goal, maintaining this experience even when the three-dimensional world screams that nothing has changed. The process demands a controlled schizophrenia to live simultaneously in two realities until they merge. During the day, you navigate through the world of appearances, fulfilling your three-dimensional obligations. But in the moments of practice, you completely inhabit the reality where your desire is already an accomplished fact. This is not denial or escapism, it is applied dimensional engineering. Failure in this practice usually comes from one of three errors: lack of specificity in the objective, passive observation, instead of active participation, or premature abandonment when the physical senses do not detect immediate change. The universe tests the seriousness of your intention through the apparent time between mental planting and physical harvest. Assumptions function like mental viruses. Once they are implanted in consciousness, they infect all of the surrounding reality until the external world has no choice but to conform to them. This is not a poetic analogy. It is the literal description of how mental premises solidify into concrete facts. Feed your mind with a premise, any statement assumed to be true, and observe the phenomenon. The assumption, even when it is completely unreal to the senses, when it is persisted in until it acquires the visceral feeling of reality, begins to exert an invisible but irresistible influence over all of the elements of your world. For an assumption that is firmly held, all of the means that promote its realization become not only possible, but inevitable. The mechanism is elegant in its brutality. The assumption first influences your own behavior in ways that you do not even consciously perceive. Your gestures change, your tone of voice alters, and your facial micro-expressions transmit the new, assumed reality. Then, like a dimensional domino effect, it begins to influence the behavior of everyone around you, inspiring them to movements, actions, and words that tend toward the fulfillment of your mental premise. People who have never helped you before emerge offering exactly what you need. Insurmountable obstacles dissolve without explanation. Impossible coincidences align with surgical precision. The skeptic calls this luck or confirmation bias. The initiate recognizes the unmistakable signature of an assumption materializing through the dimensional fabric. But here is the implication that few can face. If all changes occur first in consciousness, then there is absolutely no external force determining your destiny. None. The future, although it appears fixed and prepared in every detail, actually possesses multiple possible outcomes coexisting in the fourth dimension. At every moment, you have before you the choice of which of the various futures you will select through your current state of consciousness. This discovery should be liberating, but for most, it is terrifying. It means assuming radical responsibility for every aspect of your own experience. There is no more room to blame circumstances, other people, the government, the economy, the planets, karma, or any external force. You are where you are because that is the mathematical reflection of your sustained assumptions. The quantum field, which some prefer to call God, others call the All, possesses no agenda of its own. It depends entirely on you to determine what kind of experience you will have. It is a perfect servant, not a master. It responds with absolute precision to your sustained mental command, but the command must come from you. Expecting the universe to decide your destiny is like sitting before a turned-off computer, waiting for it to write your paper. The trap into which billions fall daily is to look first to the external world for changes. They check their bank account to see if the money has appeared. They observe their partner's behavior to detect improvements. They analyze physical symptoms to confirm healing. This is the operational definition of dimensional insanity, looking in the reflection for that which must be changed in the object that projects the reflection. Before looking for any external evidence, the only relevant question is, who are you being now in this moment? Not who you were yesterday or who you plan to be tomorrow. Who are you being now? If internally you are someone who is trapped, limited, and lacking, the cosmic mirror has no choice but to reflect imprisonment, limitation, and lack. You can decorate your mental prison with positive thoughts, but it continues to be a prison. Real change begins when you internally assume the state of being that you have chosen, regardless of any sensory evidence. You become mentally rich while the account remains empty. You assume yourself to be loved while you sleep alone. You feel healthy while the symptoms persist. This is not denial. It is understanding that internal reality always precedes and determines external reality. The time interval between the internal change and its external manifestation varies, but the sequence is invariable. First comes the alteration in the state of consciousness. Then, the world reorganizes itself to correspond. Trying to reverse this order is like planting a seed today and digging it up tomorrow to see if it has grown. Impatience kills more dreams than any external circumstance. Each moment offers a dimensional crossroads. You can choose to react to what your senses report, perpetuating the past into the future. Or you can respond from the state that you have chosen to be, consciously selecting which future to manifest. The power has always been and will always be exclusively yours. The ability to think four-dimensionally is not a special talent reserved for mystics or geniuses. It is an innate faculty that has been deliberately atrophied by social conditioning, but that remains completely functional in every human being. What has been presented here are not theories for intellectual contemplation. They are operational instructions for transcending the prison of linear time. The summary is very simple. You inhabit a mental universe where consciousness is the only substance and imagination is the only power. The world that your senses report is the effect, never the cause. Altering effects by manipulating other effects is the futile pastime of sleeping humanity. Awakening happens when you viscerally understand that only by changing the internal mental activity is it possible to produce lasting external changes. We live in a peculiar time where the most guarded esoteric knowledge is freely available, but humanity is more hypnotized than ever by appearances. Millions meditate, affirm, and visualize. but they continue operating from the fatal premise that they are separate beings trying to attract something from a reluctant external universe. They do not understand that they are the universe itself experiencing itself through a temporary focal point. The urgency of conscious awakening has never been greater, not because some cosmic event is approaching or because the window of opportunity is closing. The urgency comes from a more prosaic and terrible fact. Each day lived in ignorance of this power is a day creating by accident instead of by choice. How many undesired futures are being selected at this exact moment by billions who operate on automatic mode? The global control system depends precisely on this ignorance. A population that believes it is a victim of circumstances is infinitely easier to govern than one that understands it is the creator of its reality. This is why true knowledge is ridiculed as magical thinking, while learned helplessness is sold as realism. It is an ancient trick that continues to work perfectly. You now know the specific method, a precise mental technology for consciously navigating the fourth dimension and selecting the future you choose to experience. The temptation will be to treat it as just another interesting piece of information to mentally file away. After all, applying it requires something that the modern mind has been trained to avoid: sustained discipline without external guarantees. It requires that you act based on a law that your senses cannot verify until the results manifest. It requires that you maintain the inner vision when the outer world bellows that nothing has changed. Begin tonight, not tomorrow, not when conditions are ideal. Tonight, before you sleep, choose a specific desire. Construct the scene that implies its fulfillment. Lie down, close your eyes, and actively participate in that scene until you fall asleep in it. Do this with the same seriousness with which you would take a prescribed medicine to save your life, because, in a certain sense, that is exactly what you are doing. Do not seek external confirmation that it's working in the first days or weeks. The gardener who plants a seed does not dig it up daily to check the progress. Trust in the law as you trust in gravity, not because someone told you to, but because you yourself will test and prove its infallible operation. The three-dimensional world will continue presenting its limiting evidence. People will continue confirming their old stories about you. Circumstances will seem immutable. This is the test, not of the technique. It works with mathematical precision. It is the test of your ability to maintain the inner vision regardless of the external clamor. Each moment offers the same choice: react to the past crystallized in the senses, or respond from the future selected in the imagination. The first option perpetuates the known. The second creates the new. You have always been free to choose. The only difference is that now you know it. The future that you will occupy already exists in the fourth dimension, waiting for your conscious selection. The only truly important question is, which future will you choose? A choice, however, requires more than intellectual understanding. It requires consistent practice to establish the connection between your individual consciousness and the infinite field of possibilities. All real change begins with a deep understanding of your role as co-creator of this reality, and meditation has proven to be the most direct method for accessing this expanded state of consciousness where dimensional selection occurs. The techniques described here, the immobilization of the body, the state between waking and sleeping, and the active participation in the imagined scene, are specific forms of applied meditation. To facilitate your journey in this practice, we have developed a set of audio tools designed specifically to induce the states of consciousness necessary for accessing the fourth dimension. These tools use frequencies and sound patterns that assist in the transition from the carnal mind to the creative mind. To learn more and get immediate access to these dimensional transformation tools, click on the link on the screen or in the comments. If this knowledge has awakened something in you, if you felt that the pieces of a puzzle have finally fallen into place, write in the comments, "It made sense to me." Your declaration is not just feedback, it is the first act of consciously assuming your creative power.